Life has a way of throwing curveballs that test your patience, but nothing, absolutely nothing prepares you for the moment when Karen, the self-anointed queen of the HOA, marches across your driveway in her gaudy, pearl-studded flip-flops, flips off your power with a smug grin and declares, "That's what happens when you break the HOA's energy compliance code." Uh-huh. Can you believe the audacity? I was standing in my kitchen, carving knife, poised over a juicy roast chicken, when the lights flickered and died. The ceiling fan gave a pathetic whimper, and every smart device in the house, my thermostat, my speakers, even my fridge, glitched into a digital abyss. Did I panic? Not a chance. I just leaned against the doorway, a sly smile creeping across my face while Karen stood by the transformer, hands on her hips like she just scaled Mount Everest. "Oh, Karen, you have no idea what you've done." I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves, and said, "Karen, you just disconnected the live test relay for the emergency solar grid, and guess what? I run the company that powers this entire neighborhood." Her face, it dropped faster than a drone with a dead battery. Let me set the scene. It was a peaceful Thursday evening, the kind where everything feels just right. I was savoring a quiet dinner with my fiancée Amanda in our eco-friendly dining room, the glow of our solar-powered lights casting a warm ambiance. The wine was chilled to perfection, the lights dimmed to that sweet spot, and the thermostat hummed at a cozy 72 degrees. My home wasn't just a house, it was a masterpiece of sustainability. Solar panels lined the roof, backup batteries hummed in the garage, and a water recycling system thrived in the backyard. This wasn't a hobby. Oh no, I was testing the cutting-edge system for BrightGrid, the renewable energy company I co-founded. How cool is that our neighborhood was the lucky pilot site, with every fifth home wired into our state-of-the-art tech, all backed by a contract with the city's energy sustainability department. Permits check, clean installation, check city support, double check. But there was one infuriating thorn in our photovoltaic garden: Karen from the HOA. This woman fancied herself the moral compass of our gated community, brandishing the HOA rulebook like it was the Bible itself. She doled out fines like a kid handing out Halloween candy. Once she even cited a neighbor for hanging wind chimes too close to a shared wall, can you imagine? For months, she'd been obsessed with my solar panels, whining at meetings. "They don't match the aesthetic. They're too shiny." I showed her the permits, the HOA waiver signed by the previous president, and even offered to host a solar safety seminar. Her response, a ridiculous letter demanding a $10,000 retroactive fine for unauthorized energy harvesting, taxing sunlight. Really, Karen, I tossed that nonsense aside, but this cutting my power, this was a whole new level of outrageous. Physically severing my power wasn't just bold, it was dangerous. I stormed outside to the breaker box and saw the chaos she'd wrought. She'd bypassed the HOA electrician entirely. Bolt cutters lay discarded on the ground. The relay panel's lock hung in pieces and the wire was yanked out with zero regard for safety. Amanda slipped beside me, her phone already recording. "You getting this?" she whispered, her eyes gleaming with disbelief. Karen, completely clueless that she was being filmed mid-vandalism, kept ranting about my so-called energy crimes. "This house is bleeding energy back into the grid. It's illegal redistribution," she snapped as if she were some energy police. "Oh, please." Then Vince, our neighbor, shuffled up, rubbing his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. "Karen, my baby monitor just went out. So did my fridge." "What the hell did you do?" Karen blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me, this is an HOA matter, not for public discussion." Vince wasn't having it. "I signed up for the bright grid test too. You shut off my power, didn't you?" The truth hit Karen like a chandelier crashing to the floor. Her face cycled through pale red and a bizarre shade of peach. Neighbors started pouring out of their homes, some clutching flashlights, others staring at flickering smartwatches or frozen garage doors. The whole row was dark, only the homes not in the solar pilot, mostly rentals. Karen, always griped about, still had power. The irony was delicious. I pulled out my phone and opened the Bright Grid app, showing Karen the blinking red alert. Relay 3 emergency shutdown. I didn't need to say a word. Her silence said it all. Amanda, ever the quick thinker, replayed the video of Karen snipping the wires. Gas rippled through the crowd and one neighbor whispered, "She's so screwed." Karen, trying to salvage her dignity, straightened up and declared, "This is HOA authority. I'm the president. I was within my rights." I just smiled, cool as a cucumber. "Actually, Karen, you just violated 3 city codes in a federal energy pilot agreement. But don't worry, the authorities will explain the rest." Right on cue, a utility van with the city's energy partnership logo rolled into the cul-de-sac. The driver hopped out, clipboard in hand, looking confused. "We got an alert that the grid relay in Sector 3 went offline." He called out, "Anyone know what happened?" Vince didn't hesitate, pointing right at Karen. "She did it." The technician's jaw dropped. "You cut a municipal test grid." "Relay," Karen stammered. "It was unapproved. I was protecting the neighborhood." The technician wasn't amused. "Ma'am, you just disabled a power node servicing a third of this block. This node feeds our disaster recovery pilot system. If this had happened during a real emergency, you'd be liable for endangering lives." Amanda leaned in, whispering, "Should we call a lawyer?" I shook my head, grinning. "No need. She just sabotaged a city utility. This is going straight to the top." Karen's bravado vanished. She spun around and speed-walked to her golf cart, acting like nothing happened. But every porch camera had captured her crime. Every neighbor had seen the truth. She had no clue what was coming. I glanced at the darkened street, candlelight flickering in windows, and felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a blackout, it was the start of a reckoning. And the best part, I designed the system with a secret backup feature. One Karen was about to learn about the hard way. When you build the grid, you don't just lose power, you decide who gets it. The next morning, the neighborhood woke to eerie silence, not the usual hum of coffee makers or sprinklers, but the sound of slamming car doors and frustrated voices. Karen's stunt had triggered a domino effect. By 7 a.m., over half the homes in the pilot grid were powerless. I sat on my porch sipping instant coffee brewed on a camping stove, watching neighbors stumble out, looking like they'd been through a war. Some waved their phones, desperate for a signal. Others stared at dead security screens or tugged at stuck garage doors. Across the street, Vince was in a heated debate with his wife about saving their baby's milk. Their freezer had died overnight, down the block, Mrs. Ellerby, a retired nurse, was yelling it to a useless landline, her medication at risk in a warm cabinet. Even the streetlights meant to dim via solar sensors had stayed blindingly bright all night, ruining everyone's sleep. This wasn't annoyance, it was chaos. Karen, though, she was in her element, oblivious to the havoc she'd caused. Up early, she strutted out in her pink blazer, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard, setting up a folding table on her lawn with a hand-painted sign, "Emergency HOA Briefing, Community Energy Crisis." A Bluetooth speaker blared patriotic tunes as she greeted frazzled neighbors with fake sympathy and outright lies. "The blackout is proof," she proclaimed. "Rogue solar experiments are endangering us all. We must suspend all unlicensed systems and restore HOA energy control." Can you believe her nerve? Someone in the crowd muttered, "What is she even talking about? This is her fault." But Karen soaked up the attention like she was unveiling a statue in her honor. She waved a fake cease and desist letter, claiming it was from the county Comic Sans wrong seal, and a date marked TBD she'd typed it herself. The worst part, scared neighbors were nodding, unsure what to believe. Karen was playing politics with our electricity like it was a game. I slipped inside, powered up my laptop with a battery bank, and checked the Bright Grid app. Relay 3, manually disabled with logs, showing a hardware disconnection. I sent the data to our city contact marked urgent. 10 minutes later, Jake from the energy department called, his voice tense. "What happened over there?" I spilled everything. Karen's bolt cutters, her lawn. Propaganda, silence. "Then that relay isn't just for your street, it's part of our rapid recovery grid test. This could impact thousands if we don't fix it fast." He wasn't kidding. Bright Grid wasn't just about homes. It was simulating how solar could redistribute power during emergency storms, wildfires, you name it. Karen hadn't just unplugged a few houses, she'd derailed a citywide simulation set to report to the State Energy Board, and the outage was spreading, cascading to nearby relays. What a mess. By 9:30 a.m., City engineers rolled in, not in a single van, but with 2 trucks, a command tent, and 6 technicians in yellow vests labeled Municipal Energy Division. They cordoned off the ruined node with barriers taped and a sign, "Do not interfere, illegal zone." I couldn't help but smirk as a city officer politely but firmly moved Karen's table to the edge of her lawn. She protested, her voice cracking, but her crowd was thinning, neighbors shaking their heads in disgust. An hour later, the HOA board, finally crawling out of hiding, held an impromptu meeting in a neighbor's driveway. Karen, rattled but defiant, tried reading from a folder labeled Emergency Bylaws, but no one cared. Greg, the vice president, and a mild-mannered dentist turned to me. "Can you explain what Karen shut off?" I kept my cool. She cut a direct feed relay for Bright Grid, which handles smart load balancing and emergency power redistribution. It logs critical data for city resilience tests. She didn't just kill power to a few homes, she jeopardized a program keeping our district online in crises. Someone asked, "Can it be fixed?" I nodded yes, but it's not a quick plug-in. It needs validation, recalibration, and testing, and we're losing data every hour. Karen blurted, "You never had authorization for that system." I pulled up a digital permit on my phone, her signature from 3 years ago, glaring back at her. "Actually, Karen, you approved it," the crowd murmured, stunned. Even the board looked floored. Greg whispered, "So this is all her fault?" I nodded. "She was warned and did it anyway." Karen's face turned beet red. Maybe the system failed because it wasn't safe. Mrs. Ellerby, frail in her robe, cut in. "Karen, if you hadn't touched it, my insulin would still be cold." The silence was deafening. Karen shrank, her power play crumbling. The engineers worked on the boards, slunk to their cars, and I sipped my lukewarm coffee, knowing the grid was about to fight back. "Can you believe the nerve of some people?" A voice from the back of the crowd muttered, "What the hell is she talking about?" This was her fault, but Karen, oh, she didn't care one bit. She stood there basking in the spotlight like she was unveiling a grand monument in her own honor, waving a so-called cease and desist letter. She claimed came straight from the county. I leaned in from across the street, snapping a quick photo, and let me tell you, that document was a joke. Comic Sans font, a seal that looked like it was drawn by a toddler, and a date still marked TBD. Karen had clearly whipped it up herself. But what really made my jaw clench wasn't her terrible Photoshop skills. No, it was the fear in my neighbor's eyes. People were nodding along, confused and scared, unsure what to believe. In a moment when power was literally flickering, Karen was playing politics with our electricity like it was monopoly money. How could she be so reckless? I stormed back inside, my heart racing, and fired up my laptop, which was thankfully running on a charged battery bank. I pulled up the Bright Grid app and checked the real-time diagnostics. There it was, clear as day, Relay 3 manually disabled. The logs screamed hardware disconnection, and I knew exactly who was to blame. I sent the data to our city contact, marking it urgent, my fingers practically shaking with frustration. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed, and it was Jake from the city's energy department. His voice was tight, like he was bracing for bad news. "We just got the report. What happened over there?" I laid it all out. Karen's bolt cutters, her ridiculous propaganda meeting on her lawn, the whole chaotic mess. There was a long silence before Jake dropped the bombshell. "That relay doesn't just feed your street, it's tied to our rapid recovery grid test pattern. This could affect thousands if we don't stabilize it soon. Thousands, can you imagine?" He wasn't exaggerating, not one bit. The Bright Grid pilot wasn't just about powering a few homes. It was a groundbreaking simulation of how solar energy could be dynamically redistributed during emergencies like storms, heat waves, or wildfires. Karen hadn't just unplugged a couple of houses. She derailed a municipal-level experiment set to report to the State Energy Board next week. And it got worse. The outage was spreading, jumping sectors due to cascading power dips in neighboring relays. What a disaster. By 9:30 a.m., the city engineers rolled in, and this wasn't some quiet visit. They came with 2 massive trucks, a temporary command tent, and at least 6 technicians decked out in bright yellow vests, labeled Municipal Energy Division. They got to work inspecting the node Karen had wrecked, setting up barriers, warning tape, and a sign in the grass that read, Do not interfere, illegal zone. I couldn't help but grin as a city officer, polite but firm, moved Karen's pathetic folding table to the edge of her lawn. She protested, her voice cracking like a bad radio signal. But her crowd was already scattering, neighbors, shaking their heads in disbelief. Good riddance. An hour later, the HOA board, who'd been eerily silent until now, finally showed up for a makeshift meeting in a neighbor's driveway. Karen, looking like a cornered animal, tried to regain control, clutching a folder labeled Emergency Bylaws and reading aloud like she was still in charge. But no one was listening. The board's vice president, Greg, a mild-mannered dentist with a knack for staying calm, cleared his throat and turned to me. "Can you explain to everyone exactly what Karen shut off?" he asked, his voice steady but curious. I stepped forward, keeping my tone even, despite the anger bubbling inside. She severed a direct feed relay for the Bright grid system. That relay handles smart load balancing and emergency power redistribution during blackouts. It also logs critical citywide data for resilience testing. Last night, she didn't just cut power to a few homes. She endangered a program designed to keep our entire district online during a crisis. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "Can it be fixed?" I nodded, trying to stay hopeful. "Yes, but it's not like plugging in a lamp. It needs validation, recalibration, and testing by the engineers. And we're losing precious data every hour." Karen, desperate to save face, blurted out, "You never had authorization to install that system in the first place." "Oh, really?" I pulled up my phone and scrolled to a digital copy of the signed city permit, her own signature from 3 years ago, staring back at her like a ghost. "Actually, Karen, you approved it. This document has your stamp." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and even the HOA board looked stunned, their eyes wide with shock. Greg leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "So this is really all her fault?" I nodded firmly. She was warned, and she did it anyway. Karen's face turned beet red, and she tried to pivot. "Well, maybe the system failed because it wasn't safe to begin with." But then a soft, trembling voice cut through the tension. It was Mrs. Ellerby, still in her robe, her eyes fierce. "Karen, if you hadn't touched it, my insulin would still be cold." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Karen looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. But no such luck. She just stood there, shrinking under the weight of her own mistakes. Her power play had backfired spectacularly. The engineers kept working their focus unbreakable, while the HOA board slunk back to their cars, probably dreading the fallout. I walked back to my porch, sipping the last of my lukewarm coffee, my mind racing. The storm wasn't over, but the skies were clearing, and I knew what was coming next. Karen had poked the grid, and now the grid was about to bite back. By midday, the neighborhood settled into a tense, eerie silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind where everyone's watching, waiting for the next shoe to drop. Power was still out in several homes, and the cul-de-sac buzzed with engineers weaving orange extension cables around cones, inspecting nodes and comparing tablet readings like detectives on a case. Karen, meanwhile, had retreated to her house, blinds drawn tight like she was under siege. But don't be fooled. She wasn't scared. She was plotting. I could tell by the way she peeked through her window every time someone passed her lawn. I knew Karen too well. She wouldn't go down without some dramatic, desperate flail. But here's the thing, I was ready for her. When we designed the Bright grid system, we planned for every risk, technical and human people, unplugging equipment, messing with fuses, or yes, trying to fix systems they didn't understand. So I'd set up an off-site backup node that mirrored Relay 3's operations in real time. It wasn't just a redundancy system, it was a fortress wired with camera feeds, data logs, and tamper alerts. The second Karen yanked those wires, the backup flagged the event and locked everything into a data vault for forensic review. It wasn't just a fail-safe, it was proof, digital, visual, and undeniable. I sent the full log package to Jake at the city's energy department, copying the HOA board's legal counsel, the city compliance officer, and just for kicks, the local news tip line. I didn't expect a headline right away, but I knew they'd sniff out the HOA scandal, especially with solar sabotage Karen as the star. This wasn't about being petty, it was about public safety. People deserved to know how close our community came to disaster because one person thought she knew better. Around 2:10 p.m., Greg knocked on my door, looking like he'd aged a decade. "Hey, can I see that footage again?" he asked, sheepish and frustrated. I invited him in and replayed Amanda's video. Karen, clear as day, cutting the wires, proclaiming herself the energy ethics officer, and ranting about rogue solar redistribution, like she was busting a spy ring. Greg exhaled slowly, his face grim. Yeah, that's bad. We're probably going to need a special session vote. If we don't, the city will do it for us. Amanda walked in tossing a folder on the table. About time, she snapped. Here's every complaint Karen filed against us in the last 6 months. 14 about the solar panels. 6 contradicting each other. Greg flipped through the pages, his expression sinking. I think she's been holding a grudge since you beat her in the lawn of the month vote, he said, dead serious. She doesn't even mow her lawn. Amanda shot back. Greg nodded. She bought a robotic mower, named it Sir Grass-a-Lot, and threatened to sue us when it got stuck in her flower bed. I burst out laughing, but the humor faded fast. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. It was legal territory. Karen had crossed a line, and the consequences were coming. Oh, the audacity of Karen. Can you believe she thought she could outsmart the entire grid? I pulled up the footage from the night before, captured by the surveillance cam on the backup node, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. There she was, dressed head to toe in black, like some wannabe ninja sneaking through my side gate at midnight, flashlight in hand. The camera caught every second Karen inspecting the inverter cabinet, then yanking the main wire like she was pulling the plug on a toaster. A spark flashed, she let out a profane scream, stumbled backward into the bushes, and scrambled away like a startled cat. Greg, the HOA vice president, stared at the screen, his eyes wide with disbelief. Wait, she came back again after everything yesterday. I nodded, barely containing my smirk. Twice, actually. We've got a motion alert log from 1:17 a.m. too. She didn't touch anything. That time just stood there staring at the unit for 5 minutes, muttering to herself like a mad scientist. Okay, she's completely lost it. Greg declared, his voice flat but heavy with realization. She needs to be removed now. I leaned back, keeping my cool. That's your call, Greg, but you'd better move fast. Once the city files their incident report, this mess is going to explode. And the HOA might not just be dealing with angry neighbors. You could be liable for enabling her. Greg left my house looking like he'd aged a decade. His shoulders slumped under the weight of the chaos Karen had unleashed. Amanda and I sat in silence for a moment, the air thick with tension. Then she turned to me, her brow furrowed. Do you think she's crazy enough to try again? I grinned, a spark of confidence in my chest. Not tonight, babe. Not after what's coming next. An hour later, the engineers worked their magic, re-establishing power through the backup node like the heroes they were. Electricity hummed back to life in most of the pilot system homes, and residents started poking their heads out, cautious but relieved. I fired off a quick message via the Bright Grid Network dashboard, letting everyone know the issue was being resolved and that the city would provide an update by evening. My inbox lit up with responses, gratitude, confusion, and a few fiery notes pointing the finger squarely at Karen. One reply stopped me cold, though it was from Lisa, a board member, her words crisp and urgent. We're scheduling a vote for emergency removal. Thank you for the documentation. Please stay available for a statement if needed. A vote. Oh, this was getting good. Karen didn't show her face at the next HOA meeting, but her presence loomed like a dark cloud. To accommodate the crowd, the board moved the session to the community park, setting up a folding table, a microphone, and a portable projector that played snippets of the damning footage. Gasps and murmurs filled the air, and some neighbors outright laughed when Karen's voice blared through the speakers, proclaiming herself the supreme enforcer of energy law. Can you imagine the gall? The board laid out the evidence, then opened the floor, and let me tell you, it got ugly. Vince grabbed the mic, his voice shaking with anger. My daughter's baby formula spoiled because of her. We had to race to the next town for more before her next feeding. That's not an inconvenience, it's dangerous. Mrs. Ellerby, leaning on her walker, her eyes blazing, added, my insulin nearly cooked in my fridge. I'm 73, this isn't a game, Karen. Even Greg, stepping up as VP, didn't hold back. This isn't about solar panels, it's about someone thinking they're above the law, above safety, above basic decency. The crowd roared in agreement. Karen was done for. When the vote came, it wasn't even close. Karen was stripped of her HOA president title, banned from making or enforcing any community decisions, and forbidden from touching neighborhood infrastructure under threat of a restraining order. Word spread that she watched the whole thing from her upstairs window, probably fuming behind her curtains. But oh, that wasn't the end of her saga. Late that evening, just as the streetlights flickered back to normal, a loud bang echoed from Karen's garage. Amanda and I bolted toward the noise, my heart pounding, and saw smoke curling from the back corner of her house. Her personal generator, the one she'd bought to spite our solar system, had overloaded. Turns out she tried wiring it into her main breaker without a clue about grounding. The fire department screeched in within minutes, alerted ironically by the very solar-powered emergency node she'd sabotaged. How's that for poetic justice? I stood there watching firefighters hose down the charred edge of her garage, while Karen shrieked about faulty products and municipal conspiracies. It hit me like a lightning bolt. She hadn't just lost control, she'd lost the entire plot. The next morning, an eerie calm settled over the neighborhood like fog before a storm. You could feel it in the air. Not peace, but anticipation. Everyone was watching Karen's house. The HOA bored me. The community had been flipped upside down in just 48 hours. Power was back, and the engineers were packing up their temporary tent. But no one believed the drama was over. Not me, especially because I knew Karen. She'd never go quietly. Not without one last delusional act of defiance. That moment came just after noon when a small group of residents gathered on the grassy park strip in the cul-de-sac. Greg had called an informal demonstration at my request, and I showed up with my tablet, a mobile inverter unit, and a confidence that Karen couldn't rattle. Not with 1,000 fake cease and desist letters. As I set up, more people joined, forming a semicircle. Neighbors, the mayor's assistant, a few city engineers, even a freelance journalist with a handheld camera, his eyes gleaming with the scent of a story. The HOA board was there too, minus Karen, thank goodness. "Let me show you something," I said, my voice brimming with excitement as the crowd settled. I tapped my tablet, and the inverter hummed to life, powering a makeshift light post that flickered on behind me. This neighborhood is part of a scalable solar grid. With a flick of a switch, I can isolate homes, redirect power, even keep emergency services online, independent of the main grid. How incredible is that? Someone piped up, "Can it survive a total blackout?" I flashed a grin. "It already has twice." I showed them the live power routing map, the incident logs, and a feature for real-time reallocation based on emergency priorities. The crowd was hooked. They weren't engineers, just parents, teachers, retirees, but they got it. This wasn't some shady experiment. It was the future, and it was smart. Then, like a storm cloud, Karen appeared marching down the sidewalk with a megaphone in one hand and a roll of laminated documents in the other. Her hair was a windblown mess, and she wore a glittery sash proclaiming HOA Honorary Emeritus, a title she'd obviously invented herself. Her face was a mix of rage and desperation. Before anyone could stop her, she blasted the megaphone. "Attention residents. This man is conducting an unsanctioned energy demonstration on public property. I demand he cease immediately and submit all devices for HOA inspection." Can you believe the nerve? No one budged. The only sound was the soft hum of my inverter. Greg stepped forward, his voice firm. "Karen, you were removed from the board." She ignored him, ranting on, "This is a hostile energy takeover. It's a cult. You're letting him install solar tyranny. Do you even know where your electricity comes from?" I switched off the inverter, letting silence settle over the crowd. Then I faced her, my voice calm but razor sharp. "Karen, the only hostile takeover here is you, trying to control people's homes. Their lights, their right to reliable power." She flinched, then spun to the crowd. "He's privatizing the sun. He wants to charge you for sunlight." A few people chuckled, and someone muttered, "I'd rather pay him than deal with another HOA blackout." But Karen wasn't done, not by a long shot. She stormed back to her house only to re-emerge 15 minutes later with gloves, a set of screwdrivers, and a folding ladder. Her eyes wild with determination. I watched from the corner, my heart racing as she propped the ladder against her house and climbed to the breaker panel. Amanda nudged me, whispering, "Is she really going to do it?" "Oh, she's absolutely going to," I replied, already recording on my phone. With a dramatic flourish, Karen yanked open the panel, muttering about energy independence, and flipped every switch off. Then, like she was diffusing a cartoon bomb, she started pulling wires out. Sparks flew. She shrieked and tumbled backward onto the grass. Scrambling to her feet, her hair frizzed and eyes wild. She shouted to no one, "There, I've officially seceded from the rogue solar state." Can you even fathom the chaos she caused? Oh, what a scene it was. Karen's antics could have been straight out of a comedy skit, but the danger was all too real. Can you believe she thought she could just rip out wires and declare herself energy independent? Minutes later, her generator roared to life in the garage, and we all braced ourselves. Here it comes. But this time it wasn't flames. It was a catastrophic surge. She hadn't disconnected the feed properly, and when that generator kicked on, it sent a reverse pulse that fried her kitchen appliances and set off her home's smoke alarms like a siren in the night. She came sprinting out, arms flailing, screaming, "This is sabotage! You rigged my wires! Sabotage!" Really, Karen. The only sabotage was her own reckless meddling. The fire department rolled up, same truck, same crew, same exhausted looks on their faces. They spotted me first and asked same address. I nodded, trying not to laugh. Same homeowner, another nod, same problem. I shook my head, grinning. Worse, now she thinks she's energy sovereign. As they inspected her house and shut down the generator, Karen plopped into a lawn chair, clutching her self-awarded A honorary emeritus sash, muttering about conspiracies like she was unraveling a grand plot. One firefighter leaned to his buddy and whispered, "Third visit this week, does she get a punch card or what?" I couldn't help but chuckle, but the gravity of her actions hung heavy. Standing beside me was the mayor's assistant, who'd seen the whole fiasco unfold. She turned to me, her eyes bright with possibility. "We'd like to discuss officially expanding the solar pilot and adding safeguards to stop HOA interference." I beamed. That's the best news I've heard all week. As the sun sank low that evening, casting golden beams from the inverter lights across the grass, I felt a quiet resolve. I strolled to Karen's place. No knock, no confrontation, just a small act of defiance. I left a solar-powered garden light on her porch, shaped like a radiant sun, with a tag that read, "Let there be light." The legal kind. Amanda and I walked home hand in hand, the neighborhood glowing not just with electricity, but with a newfound clarity. People had seen the truth with their own eyes. Karen's greed, her overreach, her absurd belief that control trumped community. They'd chosen common sense and Karen. She was finally unplugged for good. The next week brought a peace we hadn't felt in years. It started subtly, garage doors gliding open, smoothly porch lights casting a warm amber glow in perfect sync, kids zipping down sidewalks on electric scooters without a single battery hiccup. The bright grid system was fully restored and recalibrated now under strict municipal oversight, with a new HOA bylaw that screamed Karen's legacy. No member, not even a president, could mess with community infrastructure without city approval. Everyone knew who inspired that rule, and the irony was delicious. But what the neighbors didn't yet realize was how far the fallout from Karen's power play would ripple. The city's final report landed like a courtroom gavel, its words heavy with authority. Karen's interference had disrupted a critical pilot project, wiped out valuable data, jeopardized neighborhood safety, and exposed the city to serious liability. The phrase "reckless sabotage of a public energy initiative" appeared not once but 3 times in the document. They even noted that if this had happened during a fire or medical emergency, the consequences could have been catastrophic. Can you imagine the chaos that alone triggered a legal avalanche? Within 48 hours, Karen was served papers, civil negligence code violations, unauthorized tampering with public utilities, and a cease and desist from the city attorney, barring her from coming within 30 feet of any grid-tied relay transformer or solar unit. No jail time, but it stripped her of every shred of power she'd clung to. No clipboard, no HOA meetings, no votes, no voice. She was done. The HOA board, now under fresh leadership, didn't waste a second issuing a formal apology to the neighborhood Greg. The new president showed up at my door, his hands clasped in gratitude, offering to waive a year of HOA dues for all Bright Grid pilot residents. I waved it off. It's not about the dues, Greg. It's about what people learn, community thrives on, trust not control. Karen had blown up whatever trust she'd had, and the lesson was crystal clear. But oh, the story didn't end there. It became the stuff of local legend. News of Karen's fiasco trickled into regional papers, then exploded online. The headline HOA Karen cuts. Power gets burned by solar genius went viral in meme culture. A clip of her shouting, "He's privatizing the sun," became an instant classic shared and mocked across the internet. But the real cherry on top was a local news crew that showed up one morning asking to interview me in front of the relay Karen had cut. I said, why not? They called the segment From Blackout to Breakthrough. The Solar Rebellion, and Amanda and I watched it that night, munching popcorn, grinning ear to ear. My favorite part. The shot of Karen's house, lights off, curtains, drawn a crooked for sale sign stabbed into her front yard. She'd decided to move, no fanfare, no goodbye, just a U-Haul and a string of complaints about ungrateful neighbors and municipal thugs. No one threw a party, but I caught more than one neighbor raising a quiet glass from their porch as her truck rolled away. Poetic right. The queen of the HOA had been dethroned, and our neighborhood had never shone brighter. I wanted to mark the moment with something lasting, something symbolic. So I designed a sculpture, a sunburst crafted from copper solar strips, mounted on a recycled steel pole, and planted it at the neighborhood's entrance. Beneath it, a plaque with a motion sensor lit up whenever someone passed. Let there be light. Let there be reason. It was subtle, classy, and a not-so-subtle nod to Karen's downfall. The HOA approved it unanimously, and I swear I felt the community exhale. But I wasn't done yet. The city blown away by how we'd rallied and how resilient the solar system proved offered. Bright Grid a contract extension to expand into nearby neighborhoods. They even named us a certified municipal infrastructure partner, giving us the legal muscle and resources once reserved for traditional utilities. How's that for a win? I got invited to speak at a regional energy conference where I presented a case study called The Human Variable Designing Tech for the Inevitable Karen. It was a smash hit with the audience laughing and nodding along. Walking home with Amanda one evening after the conference, we noticed something magical. Our neighborhood was glowing not just functionally, but beautifully. Homes now flaunted sleek rooftop solar arrays, gardens twinkled with mini cell-powered lights, and even mailboxes had solar trickle charge sensors. It looked like a smart village straight out of a sci-fi dream. The same street where Karen once strutted with her megaphone was now a beacon of clean energy and quiet confidence. Then one night Greg called, "Hey, we've got a little something for you, a thank you for everything. Can you swing by the park tomorrow at noon?" I said. Sure thing. When I arrived, the sight took my breath away. Neighbors, friends, city engineers, even folks from the mayor's office all gathered together. Greg stepped onto a small platform, his voice warm and sincere, delivering a heartfelt speech about how one person's stubbornness, Karen's, had sparked progress we didn't even know we needed. Then he pulled a cloth off a wooden sign bolted into the lawn. Burned into the grain were the words, "In brightness, we trust," dedicated to the neighbor who gave us back the light. My throat tightened and I just nodded, looking out at the crowd faces, once skeptical, annoyed or divided, now united in gratitude. That night, under the soft glow of our backyard solar lanterns, Amanda nudged me, a mischievous grin on her face. "You know, I almost miss Karen a little." I spun to her, shocked. "Seriously?" She laughed, "Just a tiny bit. She gave you a story and us, a neighborhood worth living in." I smiled, raising a glass to the sky, and whispered, "Here's to Karen. May her next HOA be miles from any breaker boxes." The lights flickered on cue, and they stayed on steady and bright, a testament to a community that chose light over darkness.